Welcome everybody to another and the first episode of my podcast in 2022, and I am delighted to have the wonderful and amazing Samantha Kelly on today with me, aka the tweeting goddess. She has the bona fide blue tick. She is also the Chief Community Officer at WeDo, the connector of dots, nice people collector, and director of the Women's Inspire Network. If you're new to my podcast, it's a bit rough and ready. We kind of go where the flow goes, but Samantha, really great to have you on as my first guest of 2022. I always start this way, sort of who, what, why, when, and I guess where maybe, and then let's see where this takes us.
Oh, well, thanks very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I love all your videos. I love all your tips. So isn't it lovely though that we can build a relationship online, and then next thing I'm on your podcast. You know, that's how it works, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Exactly. Thank you.
So what's your we're calling it mastering the Twitterverse, and that's primarily where I want to focus on, because those that follow me know that I talk a lot about LinkedIn is my primary kind of source, and the broader social networks. I am on Twitter, but I will freely admit I don't use it that well. I use it probably more as a broadcast tool than necessarily as much of an engagement tool as one should. And sometimes in my audience, professional services, law firm accountants, it's difficult enough getting them to use LinkedIn, let alone kind of branching out into somewhere like Twitter, or even further afield as TikTok or Instagram. A lot of chat at the moment about metaverse, so I thought I would play on it in terms of mastering the Twitterverse. So let's start with, how does Twitter differ, if at all, from any other kind of mainstream platforms out there?
Well, the demographic is different to a lot of the platforms, because it's very similar to LinkedIn, would you believe? That's why I find it funny when you say it's hard to convince people to go from LinkedIn to Twitter. And you've got decision makers there, you've got CEOs there. People go to Twitter for the latest news as it happens, and decision makers and CEOs want to see the latest news as it happens, and they want to have their finger on the pulse and see what's happening in the world. So initially, a lot of people went to it for that, because even if something happens on the news, I would go straight to Twitter to see what's happening. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't even watch the news. I'd go straight to Twitter. And a lot of people during COVID in particular, during the pandemic, did go to Twitter to get the latest numbers and all of that kind of stuff. But definitely the demographic are professional, urban, and the age group, age 35 to 55, and the highest growing demographic are the over 55s. So yeah, so I mean, if I'm even looking at my audience, I remember I did a Twitter poll once, and I asked my audience, I said, what age are you? Like, why are you following me, and what's your age? Like, and it was all 45 to 60 kind of were the people that was my audience. So that was about, I think there was about 69% for that age group. So, just to be aware, it is a different audience. And a lot of people B2B, but B2C also works really well on Twitter, especially if you have a link to a product. Mm-hmm. People on Twitter are more likely to click that link, and 87% of people are more likely to buy from a small business they've engaged with on Twitter. And I've done it myself. I've there's a restaurant, for example, and the guy, this chef, he's always putting up pictures. He's got a great personality, and I live 2.5 hours from that restaurant. And there's no way I would have ever gone to that restaurant, but because of him, and because people buy from people, and because of the pictures, I have to go and eat in this place. And I did. I went there with my daughter before Christmas, and we went and we had a meal there. So that's just an example of how it works, Twitter.
And in terms of industries, that's in terms of demographic, I wasn't aware of that in terms of the age profile. So I think before we came on air, I always say that I said this would be as much as a learning experience for me on a platform that I use averagely. Is there any insight in terms of that's on the B2B side, because that's primarily the audience here, but B2C and B2B is blurring anyway, as we know. Is there any kind of stats or rough insight as to what industries or industry verticals you use Twitter, or is it across all sectors?
Well, small businesses use it, but mostly service provider, like people like me, like experts in your niche, do really well on Twitter, because people go there for the latest news, but also to learn. They want to be educated and they want to learn. So if you are able to add value and teach people something new that they didn't know yesterday. But
Mhm.
also, if you can inspire, and I know it sounds a bit fluffy, but during the pandemic, people needed a bit of that, you know, and I think I always did it anyway. And I was always spreading kindness and always, you know, doing good stuff with the power of my Twitter account, because I knew I had a certain amount of power with that following that I had. It was engaged. People seemed to like me. People seemed to like what I was saying. They seemed to
Mhm.
agree with me. And so now, mind you, I don't get into controversy, and that's a really good tip. I just stay away from controversy. So
Yeah.
people think I don't have an opinion on anything, you know. It's like, yeah, but you know, I do. I just say it, don't say it. But you know, the thing about Twitter is, like, for example, when the pandemic started, I know I keep mentioning the pandemic, but look, that's where we are. The 10th of March 2020, I think it was, I put out a tweet and I just said, look, you know, if you're self-isolating, you know, I know other people who are self-isolating, maybe I can connect you with them. If there's anything I can do to help you, please reach out. And it went viral, the tweet did. And I ended up on the news. The news crew were here in my box room here in Rosslare Harbour for the 9 o'clock news. Like, it was crazy. But all I did was, I couldn't think of anything I could do. Everything was out of my control. And so I said, well, what can I do that could make a difference? And maybe is it within my control? I could actually do something useful with the power of the Twitter that I had. So that's what I did. And it started a whole movement called Self-Isolation Help. People started going, getting people's groceries, their prescriptions, people who walking the dogs.
Yeah.
It was just lovely. It was really nice, you know. But that's what I use Twitter for. I use it for doing good stuff, adding value, teaching people how to use Twitter and LinkedIn and things like that.
And I think it's interesting. I know we're going to go on to this in terms of kind of building that community around that. And again, we were touching on this before we came on air around, I'm starting to see more of this kind of, you know, chief, you know, much like your job title, chief community officer, moving into the B2B space. And that's fundamentally what social media has always been around. And again, back in the pandemic, there was a young lad who set up a Facebook group, which kind of WhatsApp group, and exactly the same thing in terms of how can we, you know, help each other, and how can we help those that were in need, or, you know, couldn't go out because they were vulnerable, and so on. And just people just kind of, you know, flock to it. And I think certainly that's what I've seen a huge, notwithstanding the political side of social media and a certain former president in terms of how he leveraged Twitter. Let's not go there. The big shift I've seen in B2B over the last, you know, 18 months, you know, LinkedIn, and probably more so on LinkedIn than certainly on Twitter, is this shift to it becoming more of a community, is this shift to becoming more personal, not Facebook personal, but insights into mental health, mental well-being, you know, all the LGBTQ stuff, Black Lives Matter. We saw that kind of narrative come out, which you wouldn't necessarily have seen 18 months, only 3-5 years ago, you know, on these platforms from businesses and from individuals. But how long have you been on Twitter? Because you've got the blue tick and you've got 60,000 followers,
64, I think now.
64,000 followers.
Well, how long have I been? 10 years, 2016. I think it's nearly 10 years. Well, no, it's not actually.
2011, I'm on here now. You joined.
Great. Sorry. Yeah.
2011.
9 years. Ooh, that'll be a great one. Then I'll have to celebrate with the 10-year one. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, just when you mentioned that, I was always about community.
Yeah.
But that's probably why I've been so successful, because all the things I've been doing, Alex, people are starting to do now, but I was ahead of them. Like, even my Women's Inspire network, I had an online global network for women. And people said to me, sure, how do you network? How can you build relationships online? How can you network online? What's a webinar? You know, they didn't even know what I was doing. But then when the pandemic hit, all the other networks were quiet. And guess what? They started coming to my network. So our membership went up 28%. So I was already ahead of with what I used to. I'm always saying about community. I'm always saying about how important it is to have these, build a community around your brand, people who already love your brand that will tell everyone else about it. I've always talked also about the CEO. It's really important that the CEO knows what's going on the company Twitter account. Like, I went to San Diego to speak at Social Media Marketing World a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I documented the trip from when I went to the bus stop, or from when I got up actually, to the bus stop, and I was sitting waiting on the bus, and I was talking about the bus, and I mentioned the bus brand and mentioned the journey and da da da, and then when I came home, I was like, take me home now to the bus and all this, and no engagement, didn't even get a like, I think at the time.
Yeah.
No retweet, no engagement saying, oh, Beth, have a safe journey, thanks for traveling with us, nothing like that. And so I mentioned it to the owner of the company, actually,
Yeah.
at an awards ceremony. He didn't even know that I had done that. He didn't even know, like. So it's important that the CEO can see what the company Twitter account is doing and who they're engaging with and who their biggest brand advocates are. Because if someone like me or you is mentioning someone's brand in a good way, like, we need these people to keep them on side so that they'll do more of those. You know what I mean? So it's funny. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting one, kind of the leadership on social, A, being aware of what's happening on social, and then B, how active how active one is on social. And again, not wanting to step away from Twitter, but the rise of TikTok, it's amazing watching how some brands are recognizing this, or rather, dare I say it, probably an age profile of a social media team which is running the TikTok accounts, and how they are leveraging yes, influencers on there, but also people with very small accounts, but engaging with them, having repartee. The Ryanair TikTok account is hilarious. The Aldi one is very, very funny. Aldi on Twitter is very, very funny in terms of the Colin the Caterpillar engaged and all that kind of stuff. And I guess this is as much the generation that is allowed to run these platforms, and then the permission factor from leadership that the world is changing in terms of the type of content that gets engagement, and B, you kind of need to be. I know we touched on kind of the demographics on Twitter, we've touched on LinkedIn, but people have heard me talk about this. Yes, you do need to be where your audience is, but it does seem that you do need to be across at least 2, if not 3 platforms. And then it's how do you, from my perspective, repurpose that content to work effectively. So if I kind of take LinkedIn, is that LinkedIn long form content, the personal brand, and I'm having problems with that phrase at the moment, because I think I believe we've gone too far with it. Especially, I think that's because of what's happened over the last 12 to 18 months. I think some interesting commentary coming out on that. But if we stick with it, at least the personal brand on LinkedIn, you have that the space to create it in terms of write your profile. And then of course it's a network, and then of course it's pushing content. Twitter, whilst I believe fundamentally remains the same, you have a lot less to work with in terms of content. Your profile, you only put so much in terms of your Twitter profile. And then of course, I see Twitter as it's much faster, it's much more reactive, and far more conversational. And I guess that's probably what makes people fearful, is that how do I find the time to do LinkedIn? And then how do I then on top of that find the time to, yes, it's very easy to listen to Twitter. You don't even need a Twitter account. Just go, if you haven't got a Twitter account, go to twitter.com, type in a hashtag, transformation, you'll see all the conversation happening around transformation. So it can be a great listening tool. When working with your clients, how do you help them kind of get over that slight shift, dare I say, in behavior that in my view is required versus what you have on LinkedIn? Because you can respond to a comment 2-3 days old, even a week old, versus typically I've found that you do kind of need to be, I could be wrong, more in the now in the conversation.
Yeah, I did a Twitter poll on this before, actually, and people expect a response within 6 hours.
Okay.
But I expect a response within half an hour. I would.
Yeah.
Right, to be happy. So as a customer, and I've highlighted several business accounts who are brilliant at this and do respond straight away. And you want, especially if it's a complaint, you want a response like as soon as possible. And it's one of the biggest things is how to deal with negativity on Twitter. It's to engage. whether it's your fault or not, is to engage and acknowledge them and take it offline to a DM. But people do expect a response or comment within 6 hours at least. 24 hours is acceptable if you have it in your bio that we are on this Twitter account from 9 to 5 or whatever. But you know what? There's a huge fear around Twitter, and it's one of the reasons is what you're saying. There's a huge fear around Twitter. People are just terrified of Twitter, and it's because of that stupid other president, whatever he did, But I do feel that all you're going to hear in the media are the negative tweets. Do you ever notice on the news? And then such and such tweeted this, and then such and such tweeted this. So it like. Leaders are using Twitter to communicate, though. I've noticed politicians in particular during the pandemic are using it to say, further to the numbers today, here's some tips or whatever it is. So they are using it. I remember I had always said that politicians should use it for good. So spreading valuable information. But you're always going to get the trolls in every social media platform, but you just ignore them and block them. And it's recognizing the power of Twitter for leadership and for good. If you are an expert in your niche, Twitter is extremely powerful, because the right people start following the right people. And when I say the right people, I don't mean the people that are millionaires, the people who are superstars. I mean the right people who think like you, get what you're doing, maybe are in business themselves, or maybe could be interested in if you're an artist, interested in art. You can find these people, you can find all of these communities. And also Twitter has created communities. I don't know if you saw that. There's actually new communities in Twitter, and not everybody has access to that. I have a Twitter community. I must invite you to my Twitter community. But it's only open to a certain amount of people at the moment. It's kind of, they're trying it out. And then also there's monetization of Twitter, and there's a newsletter feature on Twitter. Like Twitter is coming out with so many things. There's Twitter Spaces, which Twitter is Spaces. Social audio. So if you are a brand, I'm actually being asked by brands to host a Twitter space for them, because my audience will pop into the space depending on what the topic, like what we do. Who I'm working with now, it's an app for freelancers and consultants. It's fintech. It's all about, the way you pay for Calendly or you pay for Zoom or whatever. Everything is in the app. So it's to help freelancers and consultants also to get paid on time. So it's really cool. I think you'd actually really love it, Alex. And it's actually something that I really agree with, because it was one thing I struggled with, was getting paid on time. And it's so important for freelancers and consultants to get paid and, and fast. We don't want to wait 28 days or 60 days or whatever it is, so that kind of stuff. So it's to kind of make it a level playing field for everybody. But I've been building a community around We Do the brand by saying, okay, what do freelancers and consultants need? We want to learn how to do a new business plan, a strategy for 2022. We want to learn how to use social media platforms. What's the best email marketing software? All of these things, how to be successful, how to get more clients, all of these, how to sell. All of these things are things that I already do in my Women's Inspire network. They're webinars that we do every week. But when I create value, if I have a social audio room, it's like a kind of a podcast. It's social audio, so you don't show my face, so I can be sitting in my pajamas doing it. And I've started building a community on Clubhouse. I've started adding value. So I'm not selling anything. I do say, well, this is We Do, join the community on We Do, and let's help each other. But when I help these freelancers and consultants more, guess who they're going to love and download? They're going to download We Do because they're going to help me back. So when you add value and you look after that community, and I engage with them during the week as well. It's not just that one every Monday night on Clubhouse. Actually, it's on tonight, 8 p.m. on Twitter Spaces. Sorry, I know this is recorded, but it's every Thursday on Twitter Spaces. When you create a community that know, like, and trust you, and you're giving them value and you're helping them, they will become brand advocates for you.
Absolutely. And so the communities on Twitter, I wasn't aware of that, and I'd be delighted to be invited in. Are they audio rooms, these communities, or are they private communities where you can tweet each other?
Private communities, yeah. Now I'm in Ireland, so we always get everything last, but I do have have access to create a community. Especially the way, like, I have a Facebook group for my Women's Inspire Network, and I think I'll be moving it to there, the Women's Inspire Network community, because you're only going to see the tweets of that community, and you're only going to be able to. So it's kind of like a Twitter list, in a community. So I could give you a sneak peek later. But look, the thing is, if Twitter starts building communities, I mean, look at LinkedIn groups. How do you find them? You know, I mean, Twitter's really getting ahead, I think, with all these innovative ideas and new things, and the newsletter feature. I know we have that on LinkedIn as well. But there's all kinds of stuff going there that really it's worth investigating and having a look at.
And thank you for reminding me of Spaces. I mean, Clubhouse was, Clubhouse is Clubhouse, right? And all to them. But what I like about Space, and I need to think about how I can use Spaces more effectively. Again, is that Clubhouse was invite only, blah blah blah, and it was all very trendy, and then it became lots of people going me, and how to make passive income and affiliate marketing and be a millionaire in 6 days and all that bollocks. The great thing about what I liked about Spaces is obviously you already had your audience there, and I read the other day that now they may have already opened it up that you can now be a non-Twitter user and now access Spaces, so you don't necessarily have to have a Twitter account. And you can bring people into Spaces, which is awesome. If we look at the way the audio is going, because you can listen to a podcast and do the thing. You can listen to a space and still do the day job without necessarily having to interact. But you've got your community already there. And I guess if we look at Discord, so talking about moving groups from Facebook, Andy Foots moved his LinkedIn group from Facebook to Discord, and Discord, which is the kind of built around the gaming community, was getting broader audience now. Have got these kind of rooms you can drop into and just have straight out the gate, straight out the conversation. So again, for anybody that's thinking of Twitter being just a kind of one-way stream of traffic, it's worth listening to what, actually following Samantha on Twitter and listening to what she does and watching what she does, because it could be that actually you're more confident speaking than necessarily tweeting. So yes, you've got to build your audience through the content that you share and engage with. And I'm going to make an assumption here, but what they say about assumptions, but you also need to get out on Twitter and go and start engaging in conversation, tweeting and retweeting with the people that you want to bring to, rather the, I'll use the word very carefully, but influences. So there might be someone in the data science space who's very well thought of and respected in the data science space, who then will likely have a large data science following. So in order to get them to become aware of you, you need to go and interact with that person's content to become visible. And then they see you, go, oh, you're an interesting person. I will start to potentially...
Well, a great thing to do there is use a Twitter list. So what I do is if I find someone I'm really interested in, I add them to a Twitter list. I have a Twitter list called Cool People. And who doesn't want to be on Tweeting Goddess's Cool People Twitter list? So when I add someone to the Twitter list, they go, oh, I'm on the Cool People list. Who's she? And then they go and have a nosy, and then they follow me back. Like, because, and I use different words. So like inspiring women or, different kind of things. And a Twitter list is a great way to get someone's attention, because they'll go, who's just added me on the cool people list? Oh, I like that. I'm cool, So just little things like that, little tricks. But it's all about people. Everything, it's all about people at the end of the day, and how you make them feel. And even with Twitter Spaces and social audio, like if someone comes into the room, I with the Twitter Spaces, I can send them an emoji, I can send them a little wave to acknowledge that I've seen them. And then when I can speak, I can say, oh, hi, I'd like to welcome Alex, who's just popped into the room. If anyone doesn't know Alex, give him a follow. He's a Twitter, he's a this, he's a LinkedIn expert. I can actually say a bit about them, and that makes them feel good, because they've just got a shout out from just going into the room.
All about hitting the old dopamine in our cerebral cortex, cortex, right?
Yeah.
So we all have day jobs, and I touched on the fact that LinkedIn is less. You don't have to be as responsive, and absolutely, I guess the response time from within half an hour or an hour, that's more of a B2C kind of corporate account. If we're kind of in a B2B narrative conversation, so let's say I'm a chief exec or I'm a subject matter expert in, I'm going to stay with data science for the would you expect a response rate that that quickly, or is it a slightly different approach when it's that kind of one to one? I'm putting stuff out there.
Are you talking about LinkedIn or Twitter?
Twitter, sorry.
Oh, Twitter. Well, I expect. Do you mean by just a tweet?
Yeah, so let's say, because I absolutely agree with you. If I tweet Sky saying something's broken, I'd expect Sky to respond pretty quickly.
Yeah,
because,
but if
I'm just tweeting something out into the Twitterverse, I wouldn't necessarily expect somebody to respond within half an hour. If they do, great. I might engage if it happens to be there.
Yeah.
So is that dynamic slightly different when it's sort of that one-to-one conversation between people versus me going, oh, something's woken, or the thing's delayed, or what have you?
Well, do you mean, like, let's say I tagged you, let's say you did a blog post and I put out a tweet and I said, oh, great article by Alex,
Yeah.
Would I expect a response straight away? No, but I would expect you to retweet it and thank me.
Okay, and that's fair, but would that still be within
24 hours?
Within 24 hours.
Yeah.
I thought that's kind of where I sit.
However, if you put out a tweet, Alex, and you say, oh, does anyone know where I can get a good microphone for my podcast?
Yeah.
And I respond straight away, and you don't respond at all either, or you don't respond within like 6 hours, I would be kind of like, well, why did you put the tweet out? It must be just scheduled. They don't care. They don't really care. And here I am trying to help them, you know?
So, and that again is kind of my,
but that's why I have it on my phone. I can check notifications.
I agree. And I'm kind of in the same, and I guess that's the fear factor that people have, is in terms of, you do have to be more responsive in quasi real time versus necessarily other. So Instagram is probably similar versus other platforms. And that's not to say that you shouldn't you shouldn't do it. And I think absolutely a good starting point from my perspective is just to get on there and listen, watch, and kind of see what's happening. But you've segued me very nicely into automation and scheduling of tweets. who knew? Because I was going to go there. What's your take on using a scheduling tool without getting too one way or the other?
Look, I think there are lots of really good scheduling tools out there. I think it is great for generic type stuff, like, you know, join the Women's Inspire Network now. I could put one of those out every day, for example, at different times. But me, I don't. If you see tweeting got us tweeting, it means I'm there. I never schedule my tweets. The very, very odd time, if I had a conference coming up or something, I have a workshop coming up, I would actually schedule a few of those, maybe for a Saturday morning at 7 a.m., which is a busy time for sales, by the way, for tickets, and a Sunday morning at 7 a.m.
Right, and you raised an interesting thing about conferences. One thing that I've noticed is that when are we going to stop saying pre-pandemic, post-pandemic? Never. It's going to be BC and PC, not before Christ, though, before BP, rather, not British Petroleum. Is that conferences, you could find a conference, physical conferences, find a hashtag, not be at the conference, follow that hashtag, because loads of people are tweeting about the content that's happening about that conference. What seems to have happened is that seems to have stopped. So I was on I'm not going to say the brand. I was on one of the big research analysts webinar yesterday about the future CMO stuff. So future CMOs, you'd think that these people would be social savvy, with some really interesting content. I was the only one on Twitter that was tweeting, taking, snipping the screenshots, putting it out there, because actually it's a lot damn sight easier when you're at home, because you've got big
were you in
screens.
Yeah, but were you at that one in real life before? Was it any good at the time? Was it the same? Were the tweets good?
That I was tweeting? Yeah,
but like the last time you were there, when it was in real life, were there people tweeting? Or was it just that conference doesn't know?
I get what you're saying. So if the legal world, for example, pre-COVID, the legal world's not brilliant on Twitter in the marketing space generally, but you would, if there's a legal event happening, you'd typically see some noise around it when people are there. Typically stuff will be happening. Over the last 18 months, 2 years, it's been crickets.
Well, do you know what? I actually did a conference for the Women's Inspire Network, and our hashtag reached 7 million timelines. So it depends on the organizer.
Mhm.
It depends on the conference itself. Are they being encouraged to use the hashtag?
Yeah.
Like, they have to have that kind of mentality and that kind of message going out all the time during the conference. Maybe create a competition for the tweet of the day. I mean, I did a selfie competition, so I got people to take pictures of themselves at the laptop with their cup of tea. We gave away a prize, so it depends. There's so many missed opportunities, so many missed opportunities from people not using a hashtag for their events, their webinars, their conferences. It drives me crazy, actually, because it's such a huge opportunity, because I got lots of new members that weren't at the conference. It was an online conference.
Yeah.
I got lots of new members who are watching the hashtag and actually just started saying, "Oh, this looks great. I'm raging. I didn't get a ticket." And then I actually never close the ticket sales either during the conference. I keep them open. I say, "Well, look, sure, you can join us still. Here's a little discount. It's halfway through." And then they join the conference. So there's so many opportunities for sales, for showing, and also that data that I have from my conference, I can use to get sponsors for my next conference.
I think that was, so reflecting on it, and this is why I love doing podcasts so much, because you get to speak with experts such as yourself, and I know the answer, but you get just so much information happening around. But I reflect on the ones that I've been part of. So one yesterday, they had a hashtag, right? I'll give it to you after it privately, because I don't want to call the brand out, because I think that's unfair. So it existed, but what wasn't happening is that it wasn't being mentioned, and people weren't, even at the beginning, the person that was kind of introducing the two speakers weren't reminding the hashtag was there. Please share, please discuss, please, please this. Whereas typically in physical conferences, that would happen during the day, because because people are in, and I guess it's probably because A, there's so much happening, but B, I guess it's past, and this is a big global brand, right? Recognize that, I guess there's some arrogance, I don't know, maybe it's not unfair, but expectation, it'll just kind of happen by osmosis.
Well,
but you've got to, back to your title about being chief community officer, you've actually got to you've got to build a community and encourage them and engage them and remind them that you're here and engage, and please push the content out. And you touched on it earlier, this thing around user generated content can be so powerful over brand generated content. So powerful.
I use those tweets even for Sober St. Patrick's Day. Okay, we had a hashtag on the day. We have the tweets that went out, the response from people before, during, after, and we have all of that information and all of that data. So I can actually show a little slideshow of you can create content with the slideshow of all the tweets. You can create content with the pictures of the people. You can create and one thing about in-person events, I use TweetBeam, which is, a screen. And it encourages people to tweet when they see these tweets going up on the screen. They go, hang on, I want to go up on that screen. And next thing they're tweeting, so there is that visual aspect of the in-person event to encourage people to tweet. Well, at my events anyway.
So is that called TweetBeam? Yeah,
TweetBeam. Yeah, TweetBeam. Lovely team as well. And anytime I have that screen there with the tweets going up on the screen, who doesn't want to get their brand up on the screen? Everybody wants to get their
physical
brand.
Events, or are you doing that in the online events?
Physical. I could do it online and keep taking screenshots, but I mean, look, online, like there's all kinds of cool stuff online. But you can have the Twitter feed going up on the website during the conference. There's all kinds of cool stuff coming for online events, because I don't think we're quite there yet with now I've been to 2 in-person events, and it was such a buzz, I have to say. It was such a buzz, except having to wear the mask and all that, but it was so nice to be around energy. But I'm really good at creating energy online, and that's really my superpower, is creating that buzz online and creating like the Sober St. Patrick's Day conference, like the event, it was so successful. And I pre-recorded all the intros and stuff like that, but it was just such a buzz live watching it on the YouTube. It went live, and the comments from people. And I think because it wasn't necessarily about the sober part anymore. It was more about the connection with Ireland part for people who couldn't get home. you know, and that emotion, like people, I think this is sorting the men out from the boys, this pandemic.
Yeah.
It's sorting the men out from the boys. The people who are really going to stand out, like you and me and others that like us, because we're still showing up, we're still helping people, we're not going anywhere, we're still here. We were always online, so we're here. So if you want to find us, we're here. So we're helping a lot of people to adapt to this online world and to social media.
Absolutely, and I think what a way to close off what's been an insightful part. I'd forgotten about the audio side. I hadn't forgotten about it because I see it in terms of what's happening on Twitter, but I need to get my arse into gear and start thinking about how I can use that more effectively. Communities, I wasn't aware of that, so I'm going to start to investigate that. But Samantha, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for being my first guest of 2022.
You're welcome.
I need to check whether I'm on your cool list or not. Feels like the cool wall from Top Gear that was, but this is always a stupid question I ask when you've got social media experts on the podcast. But where can people find you?
Tweeting Goddess everywhere, really. And that's another little tip for everybody. You know, be consistent, you know, and have your brand and your photo, the same photo everywhere. And it's such a simple thing, isn't it? Yeah. And even just a photo, it's such a simple thing, like, you know, like, look, but that's why, like, Tweeting Goddess, look, like I'm with We Do now, but I do still do my one-to-ones and stuff, but We Do in particular, definitely check We Do out, because I do feel it's going to help us, it's going to help people like us, and it's going to help us get paid on time, and it's really going to change the way freelancers are perceived. I don't think they're given the kudos they deserve.
Well, the whole kind of gig economy, freelance economy, I know I connected you with Rollo at Choice in terms of what he's doing with that platform. You know, it's a really interesting world. So absolutely, I'll put the link. I still haven't got this YouTube thing right. I'll put the links to everything in terms of We Do, your Inspire network, your profiles, and so on. Please do tweet Samantha, or reach out to her on LinkedIn. Mention this podcast when you do, to say that's the reason that you're getting out. You never know, you might get on her cool list. But Samantha, thank you so much indeed.
Better put you on now.
I'll wait for the ping to go on my phone. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and to everyone. Almost spilled a bottle of water over there. Thank you so much for tuning in, and you know what to do. Like, share, comment, push that into your networks. If you want to be on this podcast, reach out to me. If you want to recommend people to be on this podcast, reach out to me. If there are any topics you'd like me to cover off in 2022, reach out to me and let me know. Otherwise, have a good one, and I will see you on the flip side. Samantha, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. My pleasure.